very happy to be partnering with Krull Company and with Mountain BizWorks, and congratulations on 25 years to Mountain BizWorks. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Patrick Fitzsimmons from Mountain BizWorks to begin to introduce the rest of our program. Thank you again for coming.
Well, good evening and welcome. We are very pleased tonight to be hosting this event with our partners at Krull Company. But I get the privilege tonight of introducing to you Vincent Stanley. Vincent has been with Patagonia since its inception in 1973. He is Patagonia's chief storyteller. He has the job title of the Director of Philosophy, which I think is a pretty cool job title. Congratulations on that one, Vincent. He also is the author of The Responsible Company and is a visiting fellow at the Yale School of Management, in addition to being a published poet. Doesn't have much time on his hands. I'm going to turn it over to Vincent and to Peter to introduce our other guests as well. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out this evening. The general topic tonight is in socially responsible investing, which Leslie knows quite a little bit about, and which I know very little. But I do know something about the nature of companies that I think are worthy of investing money in. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about the journey of Patagonia toward being quite a conventional company at its inception, because we didn't really think about issues of responsibility, to kind of the path we took and where we have ended up today. But to set the context, there are a couple of quotes that I've been using lately that I think kind of create a context for when you're talking about responsible business. And the first one comes from Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, and there are two characters. One of them asks the other, he says, Mike, how did you go bankrupt? And Mike says, 2 ways. Gradually, then suddenly. The second quote is from Aldo Leopold, who said that a thing tends to be right when it supports the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. And I think this is a statement that is instinctively true to all of us, yet what we do in our daily work life tends to disrupt the stability, integrity, and beauty of the biotic community. And the third quote I've been interested in lately is in the movie is kind of famous, A River Runs Through It. Before it was a movie, it was a book by a retired professor at the University of Chicago talking about his childhood in Montana. His father had been a Presbyterian minister who talked about the difficulty of learning how to fly fish. And if any of you have tried fly fishing, you know that the first mistake a fly fisherman usually makes is to put too much emphasis on this forward cast, on getting the line out into the water to a specific spot. Then usually the line just goes like that and lands about 10 feet from the fish you're going for. And that the key to success in fly fishing is something you can't see. It's in the backcast when you pause up at the top and you let the line go back 30 to 100 feet and then bring it forward and it will land where you want it. And the line of the Presbyterian minister was the fault of mankind is we tend to attain power without recovering grace. And I think this is, in this quote, is the key to those of us who are trying to do business in a more responsible way, that what we're really doing, because almost everything we do has a negative impact on the environment, but what we are trying to do is to be as conscious as possible, to do as little harm as possible, and then to keep in mind the power of the natural world and to recover something of ourselves and correct our course. When we started in 1973, we had been a climbing equipment company for about 15 years already. And it was a very small company. We made what had a reputation as being the best mountain climbing equipment in the world. The actual climbing community was so small worldwide that it was, the statement about 6 degrees of separation didn't apply. It was 1 or 2 or 3 degrees of separation. I used to inspect ice axes for hairline fractures. I knew that a friend or a friend of a friend or a friend of a friend of a friend could be affected if I missed some problem with the metal. So our sense of responsibility was to our friends and to our sport and to that particular community. And that was very strong. But when we got into the clothing business, we didn't have that same sensibility because our customers were not trusting their lives to the clothing. They would if they were in very high altitude conditions, but for the most part, it wasn't a case of life and death to wear the clothes. And so for us, our initial sensibility was, this is our irresponsible company. This is the company we're going to build in order to provide a basis of profit for the climbing equipment company, and it will we'll build it up. It will be profitable. I think some of us had the illusion that we would be retiring at 40, buying a sailboat and going off to Tahiti, the current fantasy of startups. It took us about 15 years to discover that there were serious environmental problems with clothing as well as with what we had been working with steel and aluminum. And in 1988, we opened up a store in Boston. It was our third store. We used state-of-the-art materials at the time. Low VOC paints, very tight ventilation. And that led to a problem. After about 3 days, our employees started calling up sick, stomach aches, headaches, called in an environmental engineer, asked him to tell us what the problem was. And he said, oh, it's formaldehyde off-gassing from the cotton clothes in your basement. And that was the first indication that we had that what we thought of as kind of clean cotton could be a problem. We knew we were dealing a lot with polyester fibers that were oil-based, but this was an indication that what we thought was less environmentally harmful could be. We commissioned a study of the 4 major fibers we used: wool, polyester, nylon, and cotton, and we discovered that cotton was the worst. And it was the worst not because of the formaldehyde finishes, it was the worst because of the intensive use of chemicals in growing conventional cotton. This struck us as abstract until we actually went out into the fields. And in those days in California, still grew conventional cotton and there were still organic fields. And you'd pull up to a conventional field, and the first thing that struck you was the smell. It stank. It stank of the chemicals that were used to grow the cotton. There were no birds. There were no earthworms. There was no ground cover. And the plants, the soil that held the plants in place, it was just they were holding the plants in place mechanically. There was all of the life going into the plant came from the fertilizer, not from the soil. Then you'd go to an organic farm, and there were birds, there was crop cover. There were earthworms. The soil was alive and actually growing the plants. There's a difference when a problem becomes palpable, when you actually experience a situation that you're responsible for, that you hope you can do something about. It's very different from just a kind of abstract discussion about chemical versus organic cotton. This was real. We had mothers on the trip who would go look at the gin, where the cotton seed was separated out from the fiber, knowing that the oil from that cotton seed was going into food for their kids in the conventional farm. One of the things that we realized was when we first started looking at polyester was at that time there was nothing we could do to create a polyester that didn't come from oil. There may be a different day coming on that. But for cotton, we knew that organic cotton was grown. We had been to the farms. And so we made the commitment to actually switch all of our production in sportswear from conventional cotton to organic cotton over an 18-month period. It was difficult. We had we bought all the cotton in the San Joaquin Valley and we prayed for rain. And we got enough rain. We had enough supply, but we had to develop an entirely new infrastructure for organic cotton. We had to develop we had to find new spinners. We had to find new knitters and weavers. The people in our company who were working with these products had to figure out a new way to work. But the lessons we learned from actually dealing with this problem, the lessons we learned from sort of facing down the problem that conventional cotton caused and from finding a solution, actually made and motivated our employees who were, after they visited those farms, were absolutely committed, even though it was a pain, to the company's decision to make this change. It enlivened our customers. It made us, gave us a broader base of customers, not just outdoor people, but also people who cared about the issue of organic versus cotton, versus conventional cotton. It also, because we were successful dealing with that, after 2 or 3 years, it had actually increased our business. It also provided a kind of cultural knowledge in the company, a sense of, we learned from our failures, but we gained confidence from our successes. And this sense of confidence from having made that change also enabled us to make other changes, to start to develop with our supplier a polyester fabric with recycled content, to start looking at the possibility of cradle-to-cradle manufacturing, which we did for our underwear and for our synthetic insulation, so that we started to invite customers to return their used-up insulation and underwear. We can collect it, we then ship it to Japan, it's melted down and made into new fiber of equal value. It also allowed us, I think, to really change our relationship with our customer at a certain point when, after we had developed this program of cradle to cradle for about half our line, we started to realize, this is not the end-all be-all. Because finally, it doesn't really make much of a difference if you recycle what should not be made in the first place. And that there's a reason that you have the 4 R's, reduce, repair, reuse, recycle, that the attention comes at the very beginning, that you want to be making products that should be made. We want to be buying products that should be made. And things that should be made should be repairable. And things that are not in circulation you should sell them or give them away to someone who can make use of it. The biggest, we actually, we now run the largest repair facility for clothing in North America. And at the time we looked at this problem, it took us 12 weeks to turn around a zipper repair. So we really put a lot of resources into this. But the biggest question for us was the whole question of reduce. Because how do, as a consumer products company, do you go out and say, don't buy our stuff if you don't need it? Does that sound disingenuous? Does that sound like we're not the people who should be saying that? So we decided what we would do to address that issue is in 2011 we took out an ad, a full-page ad in the New York Times on Black Friday. It's the day after Thanksgiving, the biggest shopping day of the year. And we put the headline, "Don't buy this jacket." But the headline was an attention getter, but what we did in the copy was to illustrate one of our best products, one of our least environmentally harmful products, one that was 40% recycled polyester, one that can be recycled cradle to cradle, one that lasts for 10 to 15 years in the first place, so it's incredibly durable. But what we did, we pointed out that even though this is one of the least harmful products we make environmentally, it still, in its manufacture, uses enough water to meet the needs of the village for a single day, generates 23 times its weight in greenhouse gases, generates 2/3 its weight in scrap waste. What we were pointing out is that everything we do, nothing we do in the manufacturing process as a species is yet capable of being truly sustainable. We are taking back more from the earth than we can replace. And so that every choice we make should be towards minimizing the kind of environmental harm and eventually toward the kind of engaging in the kinds of activities that actually regenerate the health of the natural world, of the natural systems that underpin our human society. Have a sustainable business without paying attention to the health of the numbers. And the second is to employees who make any business possible and to their well-being. And the third is to customers who are the people that keeping your business alive. The fourth is community, and we include community not just where we have stores and not just where we operate in Ventura, but also consider all parts of the supply chain and the business community as parts of our community. And the last element that we included in the book, which is the one that's most unconventional, is a responsibility to the natural world and to the health of the biotic community, and that underpins everything that we do. So I think to kind of tie into, Leslie's going to speak about the work she does, and we'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to cease my comments until we get to the Q&A and to the discussion. But anyway, that's roughly what I want to say. So thank you very much.
What I can say about Leslie and Green Century is that they get it. Responsible investing is not just a marketing and sales tactic for them. The firm's people care about making a difference. From being a leader in the fossil fuel divestment movement to advocating for responsible palm oil production and sourcing to transparency and action on climate change. They are the real deal. I'm proud to work with them and to give our clients some of the best opportunities out there. Again, Leslie serves as president and a board member for Green Century Capital Management. She has also served as chief of staff at Corporate Accountability International and the executive director at Green Corps. She has a BA in economics from Boston College and currently serves on the advisory board of the Business Ethics Network and the Intentional Endowments Network. Please welcome my friend Leslie Samuelrich.
Hi, how's everyone doing? Great. Excellent. I'm excited to be here in Asheville, and you can hear me, right? Okay, good. Thank you for that very nice introduction. And I am going to talk about fossil fuel divestment or fossil fuel free investing, depending on the words it used. I know, right on. Before I do that, I'm going to, first of all, who's heard about fossil fuel divestment before? Okay, I'm in Asheville, right, after all. Before I do that, I'm just going to tell you a few things about Green Century. And then I'm going to get into the moral, political, and financial reasons that I think you should consider fossil fuel-free investing, give you some tips on how to do that, and then we'll probably have to leave the rest for Q&A. So Green Century was founded just after Earth Day 1990. We're an investment advisory firm, which means that for us that we run 2 mutual funds that are environmentally and socially investing in responsible companies. We also do a lot of shareholder advocacy, which we'll talk about a little bit. This kind of goes in and out, but I'm just going to go with it. Which means that we push the companies that we invest in to be even better. So with their supply chain or with their environmental policies and practices. And then the unique thing about Green Century is that we were founded and are owned by environmental groups. And we're the only mutual fund in the country that is like that. We're owned by a network of environmental groups called the Public Interest Research Groups. Okay, so let's dive into divestment. So again, there's 3 main reasons that I think people are doing that and doing that in really record numbers. The first is probably the most natural is just a moral alignment. People, and I bet you are among this crowd, try to live a sustainable lifestyle, whether it's in your home, in your office, in your work, it's biking, it's what you eat, it's the groups you're involved in or the political campaigns you work on. And so by extension, people have, instead of creating a wall between all of that and what their money does over here, they have looked to apply their values to their investments. And it's pretty easy to do that with socially responsible, environmentally responsible investing, and it is possible to do it on fossil fuel-free investing. If you just don't want to be aligned with the industry that I believe has driven climate change and is responsible more than any other industry for the crisis that we find ourselves in, you don't have to be. So you can get out of Exxon and Chevron and the oil and gas and fracking companies and invest in other companies and other mutual funds that aren't doing that. And that has driven a lot of individuals. I think it's fueled a lot of the campus, just starting at the moral point of view. And the fastest moving group that we've seen are actually churches, both institutions of churches and the individuals in those faith centers that just feel really strongly that this is what they want to do. The second is the political ramifications of divestment. People have heard of 350.org or Bill McKibben? Yes, excellent. So there are lots of smart policies and ideas on how to solve climate change. And they have been around for a fairly long time. It's not that we don't know what to do to stop carbon emissions at the local or state or national or even international level. In my opinion, the obstacle is that we don't have the political will and the political power to bring these solutions into play. And really the biggest reason is because the fossil fuel industry is so rich and powerful and has so much clout that they are blocking what would be a sensible and reasonable and rational solution to the crisis that we find ourselves in. And so this is not news, I bet, to any of you in the room. But for decades, people have been trying to figure out how to break apart all this power and influence they have. And after trying to engage with them for decades and, maybe be more polite about it, though some people, polite is sort of a, I'm not going to use that word, but, you know, trying to talk to them and reason with them. It's not a rational thing to be creating more carbon pollution and risking what we're risking. So that the next form is to actually take the most aggressive form of engagement and divest. And so the political movement around climate change really needs a lot more power, and divestment is a very public way to do that. If you just do it for moral reasons and do it on your own, that's great. But to do it publicly, to sign a pledge to be the Rockefeller brothers that comes out and says, we made our money on oil, we have tried to change these companies for a long time, they are not changing, and we are publicly going to divest, that lends an incredible amount of power and clout that then the industry does not have when they're over in Paris this fall trying to derail the international climate talks, or when they're in Congress, or they're finding the EPA coal plant regulations that they're doing at every stop. And that is the power that I think when institutions divest and when individuals divest and do it publicly and join together, that it makes a difference. The third, wearing my financial advisory and investment advisory hat, is our financial. And there's a growing body of evidence that shows that it's not just morally or politically possible and helpful to do this, but it is financial. So I want to give you a little bit more depth on that, because that is frequently where you or your family, or not if you're working with Peter or Neil at Krull, but maybe a different financial advisor or some institution will sort of say things that will go, well, you'd lose a ton of money, or whatever it is going to be. So here are the reasons to think about it. One is that generally people are trying to avoid risk in their investments. You have different risk tolerances. I'm sure you've thought about how it is if you're you're kind of betting on more volatile industries. But the energy sector is one of the most volatile sectors that you can invest in, period. And that is a direct quote from MSCI, which is just an acronym, but originally it stands for Morgan Stanley. That's the MS. So this is not some groovy investment firm kind of saying this. And we are a groovy investment firm in some ways, but it is just one of the most risky sectors. The second is the short-term implications for investors. So right now, a lot of the oil companies, for example, are doing these very expensive exploration projects because all the kind of cheap oil has been found in a way. So they're going offshore, they're doing tar sands. Shell is going back into the Arctic. These are very expensive projects, as well as being very environmentally risky and dangerous. And what that means is that they are counting on recovering a cost of between $80 and $90 per barrel of oil to break even or to make money on these projects. And if people have been following it, or if you haven't, oil is not anywhere near there right now and hasn't been. It's, down to 40, and I can't predict where it will be, but unless it's back up at 80 or 90 when that oil comes on, those projects will lose money. And what that means for shareholders is that right now, that company is spending the money on doing that versus anything else, including giving it back to shareholders in dividends. So for our point of view, why risk holding these assets now? Like, why not transition out of holding these companies so that when that happens, you are not one of the investors in a company that has these stranded assets? So those are the three main reasons. There's lots of research too that shows that if you take fossil fuels out of your portfolio, that there's basically no negligible impact. And in the financial world, you do say it in that way, which is not incredibly positive, but that is how you say it. There's also times when it will be advantageous. So if oil and coal and gas companies are not doing well in the stock market, and you're not invested in them, you could actually see benefits to being out of fossil fuels. Not just that you won't lose as much, you might lose money, but it actually will be benefits to you. There's a 25-year study that a firm called Advisor Partners did that shows that there's a red line and a blue line. One is a portfolio with fossil fuels and one is without. And for most of the time, when you look at it, it just looks like a purple line because it's almost impossible to differentiate where you have lost or gained money. Then there are certain years where the red line is higher, the blue line is higher, and they go back and forth during certain periods. But as an investor, unless you're a 1-year short-term investor, in which, I don't know, you're doing something else. If you're a long-term investor, which most people are, they're saving for retirement or college or something beyond a year or two from now, that you want to look at the long-term track record, even though that is not an indicator of future performance. You want to see what would have happened in the past had you done this. And what you would have found is that it had been basically the same. During some periods, it would have been better to be divested, and some periods might not have been better. But it's going to average out. There are a lot of investment firms and a lot of mutual funds that do not offer divested products. And I think, I can't speculate exactly on the reasons why they are not doing that, but I do know that when they're talking about engaging with fossil fuel companies and trying to retain a seat at the table to try to influence these companies to become the renewable energy company that maybe they hope they will be, that shareholder engagement does not let you change the core business of a company. So it would be like, we got Starbucks to source sustainably grown palm oil. That's a supply chain issue, and you can do that. And shareholder advocacy can do that. No shareholder advocate, no matter how talented or motivated they may be, is going to get Starbucks to stop their core business of selling coffee. And that is the analogy to fossil fuel companies. Yeah, you could get them to maybe make their trucks more efficient or maybe cap the fracking wells that they have so there's less methane going into the air. You're not going to get them to stop fracking. It is made out to be a lot harder than it is. And there are solutions available to you as an individual investor, as someone working with the financial advisor, that are available to you to do it. There's not as many, but they are available to you. And the main point from the political point of divesting is to stop investing in new fossil fuels. Stop investing more money now and phase out of it over 5 years. That is the actual divestment campaign ask, and it's actually asking you only to get out of the top 200 companies. It's not even the whole industry. It is possible. There's lots of resources for you. We have a whole guide on how to do it if you're doing individually. There are very talented advisors that can help you do it. If you have need and want a little bit of assistance on it, they can put you into investments that you're going to feel really good about. They're going to be cool, sustainable companies. Patagonia is not a publicly traded company, but it'd be kind of like if Patagonia was a publicly traded company, that their core business is a good one, and they have great policies, and they have solid returns as well. But I want you to know that there are lots of options to move forward, and that if you haven't done it, you are most likely invested in fossil fuels, because almost virtually every mutual fund is invested in fossil fuels, whether you've ever looked at the underlying holdings or not. And I'm not saying that to make you feel bad or guilty. I'm just saying that's the fact. But right now is the time to look at what you can do and to move forward. And I'm really glad you came here to listen to both of us about how you can do something that's bold in one way, but in another way, as I was thinking about it, it's just smart and impactful and forward thinking. And so whether you want to call that bold or just a good move, whatever one kind of works for you, I encourage you to do that. Thank you.
And like Leslie said, it really is not a difficult process to divest from fossil fuels, but you have to find somebody who's going to help you out probably. And the opportunities are out there. They have a great guide on their website. So again, going to greencentury.com makes a lot of sense. Go to our website as well, which is investoryourvalues.com. And I think everybody knows that Patagonia.com is somewhere where you can buy really cool stuff, only if you need it. All right, well, we'll start out with just a question for Vincent here. You know, Patagonia advocates for and has made, obviously, a lot of bold moves over the years. What are some of the bold moves that you see happening in the future? And if you wouldn't mind, give us a bold challenge to us here tonight in Asheville.
Well, the bold challenge would, of course, be to divest from fossil fuels.
I'll pay you for that later.
One of the things that we've done recently is to get involved in the food industry. In a very small way, we have a company called Patagonia Provisions that currently we sell wild salmon. It's caught carefully in retort packages. We're selling fruit bars. We're selling sampa soup it's an ancient grain. And we're just started to sell bison jerky from a project of ranch lands that are attempting to restore the prairie in South Dakota. And one of the things we see here is if we have a revolution in agriculture, if you start to grow grains with deeper roots, if you continue the movement for organic vegetables, if you continue to move away from industrial animal farming practices, then you have a potential to sequester carbon in agricultural land that can make a big difference for climate change and also make a huge difference in terms of the health of the natural communities. So that's one thing that we're looking at now. It's way beyond our capacity, so that's kind of exciting. And it engages us with new people.
So one of the core tenets of socially and environmentally responsible investing is shareholder advocacy. And we did talk a little bit about that, how in certain areas it works, certain areas it doesn't. Leslie, you talked about palm oil briefly. I don't think that most of us really have any idea why that's an issue. Would you just sort of give us the basics, why you guys chose palm oil as an issue and what success you've had trying to make change through shareholder advocacy?
Sure. Have people heard of palm oil before? Yes. Not that many hands would have gone up 5 or 6 years ago. Okay, maybe in Asheville people would have known, but not that much in other places. It's the most widely used vegetable oil in the world. Soap, shampoos, crackers, cereal. Once you realize it's there, then you see it everywhere. The reason we picked it was really to kick off a deforestation or a stop deforestation campaign, which is related to our work around climate, which is our top priority. And deforestation drives a lot of carbon emissions and climate change, both because burning and destroying rainforests, for example, sends up carbon into the air, but also destroys the carbon trapping abilities of a forest. So for the people more in my age bracket, you may remember when forests were described as the lungs of the earth. Does that ring a bell with anyone? Right? They like clean out the air. So if you destroy the rainforest, then it's reducing that. So we really wanted to reduce the amount of carbon pollution that's happening in a super tangible and concrete way. So we kicked it off with palm oil because there was also a lot of pressure on businesses from the nonprofits and NGOs that had been campaigning around this for many years. So that they were under outside pressure to do it. It was creating sort of business risk for them. So as investors, we could go in and go, this is actually a business risk that these groups are campaigning. You have people in front of Kellogg's dressed up as Tony the Tiger, and the tiger is dying in the rainforest. Like, this is terrible for you. We actually got on the Kellogg's quarterly earnings call, and they called on us, which was amazing because they knew who we were, and they let us ask our question. They didn't cut us off, and there was a reporter from Bloomberg on the line who then wrote the story, who then kicked off Kellogg actually paying even more attention to us, saying, what are you going to do about this, business threat and brand recognition piece? So that's what we did, and we started with Starbucks, and we went to Kellogg. We focused on the consumer-facing brands, so the brands that are more household names, and we got a number of agreements there, and then we moved through the supply chain to ConAgra and to ADM, Archer Daniels Midland, and we got them to adopt sustainable zero deforestation policies. With ADM, it applies to palm and now to soy, which then kicks off our next campaign. And the result is that over the last 24 months, the supply chain has gone from 5% of it being covered by these policies to 95% of it being covered. So we played the role of the investor voice. There are other groups involved too, but it's like a huge success story. And now we're moving on to soy, and we'll probably move on to beef, cattle, and sugar in the years to come.
Great. Krull Company is a B corporation, and if you haven't heard of that, it is a benefit corporation. In 2012, Patagonia became a B corporation as well. And one of the important aspects of B corporations is sourcing. That's one of the things that you get graded on. Let's talk a little bit about B corporations. Why did Patagonia decide to go through the process, which is a very, very rigorous process, and what kind of positives have you seen from being a B corporation?
We were very interested when we started to see the B Corp movement develop. And we looked at it and we thought for a long time, we said, why should we become a B Corp? Because we've already helped start 1% for the planet. We're giving 1% of sales to environmental causes. We had helped start Fair Labor Association, which vets the labor practices in the garment factories. We formed an association with the Swiss group on analyzing the chemicals in our fabrics, and we helped start the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which is an organization now of over 100 companies that make more than a third of all the footwear and apparel sold, and looking at minimizing energy use, greenhouse gases in thousands of factories. So we're stretched a little thin, and we're on all these fronts, and all of a sudden we look at the B Corp movement. But what caught our attention eventually are two things. One is we are a privately held company, and we have aging owners who are going to leave the company to their children. And what the legal status of being a benefit corporation in California enables us to do is to write our core values into our business charter, our articles of incorporation, which means that if one of the children wants to sell part of the stock, anybody buying into the company has to abide by those values. So we've essentially set up a poison pill for investors who don't share those values. And then the second reason is one I kind of described to you what these 5 elements of responsibility are. We didn't have anybody looking holistically at all of our practices, which is what the B Corp assessment does. Is it looks at how is a company treating its employees, how does it engage in its community, what are its environmental practices. It does all of that, and although we take the time as a self-assessment, it is verified independently by B Corp by B Labs every 2 years. So we get a report card, and we also get a baseline measurement. So we had one report card in 2012, and we did a second one in 2014, and we could see where we had improved, where we had backslid, where we needed to pay attention. So the third element for being a B Corp is less true for us, but I think it's really true for almost everybody who becomes a B Corp, is that you make friends. You have a community of like-minded companies. You have people to talk to about the problems and also the opportunities that being a B Corp provides. So those three things are huge.
But you're both strong advocates for socially and environmentally responsible investing. Vincent, you mentioned it in your book. I'll start with Leslie here, though. What drew you to the industry, and what do you like about working within the socially responsible investing industry?
Well, I'm on, right? I'm relatively new to the socially responsible investing industry. I started Green Century 3 years ago because when I majored in economics, and honestly by my senior year I was disillusioned with economic theory. It didn't match up with my social change work because I was an activist on campus too. And so for about 25 years I worked for nonprofits, training organizers, running environmental campaigns at the national and international level. I was getting frustrated because the corporations were not paying very much attention to us as much as I wanted from an activist point of view, and we knew what they could do and should do, and I don't know, I just felt an itch to do something else. My daughter was going to high school, and I thought, okay, that she's changing something, I'm going to change something too. And there was this position open at Green Century, and since it was owned by environmental groups, I think I forgot the most important part of the story, which was when I was a senior, I was going to be a stockbroker, and I interned with the stockbroker, and I just really hated it. So I came back, I go, well, I know something about this, and maybe I can make a bigger impact this time around. So I came into it, and I love it. It's so great because the money we're making is for the environmental campaigns. I get to work on climate change and divestment, which I think is super important. I get to talk to investors and work with really cool, motivated financial advisors who care about the same issues. And I feel like we're making a difference in this strategy, and certainly through the shareholder advocacy, the companies pay a lot more attention to us as an investor. It's like amazing how fast they return calls and listen to you, and we're able to get things done. Given that I'm like literally the same person, I just have a different place in the, in their world, so it's great.
We're a privately held company, so investment has not been a big issue for us, but we do have a new initiative that we started last year called 20 Million and Change, which we take $20 million each year and invest it in like-minded companies in energy, waste, water, or apparel, or the food businesses. And it's been wonderful for us because what it has done is we've attracted a lot of very innovative people who've come to us with ideas, and some of them we're starting to partner up to develop in our long-range advanced R&D. We're starting to develop ideas that we think will be really good for our company in 5 to 10 years. And the other thing we're trying to do is to, as we have our toes in the venture capital world, is to change the rules of the game a little bit. So we take significant shares, like 2 to 10%, but we stick with a minority share. We don't try to manage the company, and we don't set rules about return on investment. These are not social investments, social investments are often made with the expectation that you're going to get back half your money or something like that because you're doing good. These are business investments.
With that, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to say thank you to Vincent for coming from California to spend some time with us. I want to say thank you to Leslie for coming down from Boston to spend some time with us. thank Steve with Warren Wilson for giving us this wonderful space to hold this evening. Patrick Fitzsimmons, Matt Raker with Mountain BizWorks, who have been a great partner on this as well. And finally, and we can applaud them as well. And finally, my team at Krull Company, which is Neil Yelverton over here, Terry Keene in the back, and Lisa Sluter as well. So this has been a wonderful team effort. Make sure that you are a Patagonia investor by buying the products. Make sure you visit greencentury.com. Make sure you continue to support Warren Wilson as an amazing part of our community. We are at investwithyourvalues.com. Thank you again for coming out this evening.